We are live.
Okay. So with that, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Ms. Widener, if you'd kindly do the roll call.
Mr. Dorr?
Here.
Mrs. Evans-Brockett?
Here.
Dr. Hallis?
Here.
Dr. Kohler?
Here.
Mrs. Lofton?
Here.
Mrs. Mayers?
Here.
Mrs. Roberts?
Here.
Dr. Weston?
Here.
Ms. White?
Here.
All present.
Thank you. If you join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and for the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And with that, we have the reading of the PVSD mission statement. The mission of the Perkiomen Valley School District is to cultivate an inclusive community of learners empowered to grow intellectually, socially, and emotionally. Item 1.05 is an approval of the agenda. So the motion is to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second, Wade.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, thank you very much. Motion passes. Item 1.06 is an approval of the minutes. The motion is to approve the minutes of the December 14th and 21st, 2020 and January 4th, 2021 minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Wade.
Second. Matt Dorr.
I have a motion and a second. Yays, please.
Aye.
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 Any nays? Motion passes. That brings us to item 1.07, which is a special recognition, and I turn it over to Dr. Russell.
Thank you, Dr. Hallis. And it is my pleasure this evening, which we do annually every January, to recognize our board members. This is Board Recognition Month. So January is officially School Director Recognition Month, and tonight I would like to take a few moments to honor the volunteer members of our school board. And let me emphasize volunteer. It's been quite a year. The 9 individuals who make up our board deserve to be recognized for their dedication and commitment to Perkiomen Valley School District, especially now. This past year has been quite a roller coaster, and the 9 volunteers who serve on our board have done an outstanding job of navigating through schools being closed for 3 months, helping us to develop a plan to reopen schools, and providing guidance as we determine the steps we need to take in order to get back to normal, that normal we know, as we refer to it. On average, school board members devote up to 10 hours a month to complex responsibilities, including adopting policy, voting on budgets, evaluating school security issues, and reviewing hiring decisions. I would imagine that average went up quite a bit this year with all of the decision-making that had to take place over recent months, as well as the meetings that occurred. There were additional meetings this past year. Their work is unpaid and often comes with controversy and the need to make difficult decisions on behalf of a diverse array of stakeholders. We hope the community will join us in thanking the board for their hard work and dedication, given how difficult this past year has been. Please remember that they are also taxpayers, community members, and parents who often share your concerns and your desire to make sure your children have the best learning experiences possible. They deserve our respect and gratitude for all they have done as we attempt to continue to fulfill our mission of the Perkiomen Valley School District. And really a heartfelt thanks from me for your dedicated time, energy, all of it this year. Again, I can't emphasize enough how challenging this year has been for any of us in education. So thank you for your service to the school district. We do have gifts for you, which we will make sure we get to you somehow. Very simple, but again, a token of our appreciation. So to the 9 of you serving as the Board of School Directors for Perkiomen Valley, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. That brings us to section 1.08. And just to review procedure for public comment, again, please state where you're from and your full name. And just everyone be aware, we actually will be listing a timer. So each person, as acknowledged, has 3 minutes to make comments, and then they'll receive a warning. And after that point, the mic will be terminated. So this way, anybody that makes a comment, or anyone who wants to make a comment, has 3 minutes. And with that, I see one hand up, Mr. Gale. Mr. Ganesh, if you could turn his mic on, please.
Mr. Gale.
Thank you, Board. I appreciate that. Firstly, Gene, when you cite the Pledge of Allegiance, you need to do it correctly. You just read it incorrectly using the wrong terms. It speaks to your character and your arrogance. As a member of the service who lost 42 of my guys in the desert, I find it beyond offensive and disrespectful. It's quite sad that you can't even recite the Pledge of Allegiance correctly. Now, I wanted to address the comments at the very end of last meeting dated 4/1/21. In those comments, Board member Beth Ann Roberts stated that she would like Mr. Subers to clear up any criminal records. Please note at that time, nor any time before or since, has Ms. Roberts actually denied that she had been found guilty for bad checks, as well as being sued for thousands of dollars for non-payments of her debts. Granted, some of these date back a while, but the fact of the matter is Ms. Roberts is not being truthful. I am calling on her now to publicly state if she has ever been charged with any sort of criminal offense, be it summary even in nature, as well as her failure to pay certain debts that may have taken place in not only Pennsylvania, but also Maryland. This brings me to a more serious issue at hand. Mr. Subers is an officer of the court. As such, he is subject to the rules of the professional conduct. Specifically, Mr. Subers is in violation of Section 4.1, truthfulness and statements to others. This section reads as such: in the course of representing a client, a lawyer should not knowingly make false statements of material fact to a third person or law to a third person. Mr. Subers stated publicly on record that he did not find any criminal record offenses for the board member Beth Roberts when searching in the PA Unified Judicial Weapon System. Please find attached, and I've sent this in for the public record already, to this message for the public record, 2 criminal offenses for Ms. Roberts, for both summary offenses for bad checks committed in the mid-2000s, as well as a civil filing for failure to pay debts of almost $9,000. There can only be 2 reasons for this. Mr. Subers either lied, breaking the ethics rule above, or he is entirely incompetent and could not find them. In either case, I am demanding Mr. Subers resign from his position effective immediately. I have filed a complaint with the appropriate state review board regarding this incident. In either case, Mr. Subers is either a liar or completely and totally unable to effectively perform his position as school solicitor. In addition, I am calling for the immediate resignation and removal of board member Beth Roberts for the above facts. Ms. Roberts is clearly incapable of making decisions and being trusted with such large sums of monies as she is a being member of this board. With that, given our current climate of people being threatened and balance of power being threatened by individuals, Ms. Roberts needs to be removed and held accountable for her actions, encouraging posts on her formerly publicly available Facebook page that was an image of an AR-15, indicating that the way to deal with people, quote unquote, like him, referring to me personally, was by pointing a weapon of mass destruction at me. Now, this post is directed personally and directed at my personal safety. As such, I am fearful of Ms. Roberts and her quote-unquote friends that she has to enforce such threatening remarks. I will be filing a police report ASAP, in addition to demanding she step down or being removed immediately. Likewise, Ms. Roberts used her business power in order to attempt to have children and youth services remove my child from me because I was outspoken against her and her draconian policies and locking down the children from the schools. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see no other hands raised. So if that's the case, we could kindly move to section 2, which brings us to item 2.01, student liaisons report. Ms. McGovern and Mr. Smith, if you would, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to share that today, as many of you know, the students returned in the A group, I believe, at the high school, and the group 1s and so on at the other levels of schooling for hybrid learning after the break because of the holiday break. And then the only other really major event going on for January I would bring up is MLK Day. Mrs. Lester created a lot of great opportunities for virtual volunteering, some in-person, hybrid volunteering. So I think a lot of students are going to be taking advantage of that. And then just to piggyback off of Dr. Russell's note, if it's special recognition for the board month, I just want to say it's been an honor to be a student representative for as long as I've had, and it's been a joy to work with all of you. So thank you.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to comment on
Ms. McGovern's comments. I'd like to thank everybody on the board. It's been a true honor to serve on the board as a student representative. And I would also like to appreciate the opportunity on Martin Luther King Day to volunteer in our community.
Thank you very much. That brings us to item 2.02, which is the president's report. And there's actually a couple things I would like to address. One, there seems to be a misunderstanding of what exactly Pennsylvania government has meant by stating that schools must be open. Some have taken this to mean that schools must be completely reopened. But as Dr. Russell will go over in greater detail to her report, or in her report, PV has been where the attestation form, which is the report that's needed to explain how we're going to open, we've largely, for lack of a better term, maxed that out for some time. Most districts have remained entirely virtual, and the push now is for school to open based upon the parameters of the attestation form to which PV currently adheres. In other words, we've had our schools as open as they could be under the guidelines of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. To open them further would exceed the guidelines set forth in the attestation form per the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. This is a rubric which Dr. Russell will go over in her report, but I just offer it to give some context to the public because there have been some questions of what do open schools mean. We've been able to bring back most of our students who are in need, our special education students, and we've, made it a priority to open school as much as we can. Some districts have gone back to a face-to-face model. These districts were able to do that either because the volume of students desiring to return full-time was sufficiently low that they could maintain social distancing based upon the square footage in their classrooms and other spaces. Or in a couple cases, they decided to decrease social distancing. In one case, as little as 3 feet. And it's important to note that the district that did that closed 2 schools this past week. So there's some evidence here that hasn't been brought to the fore as to, or how we should think about opening schools. And the other interesting thing there is those schools, in many cases, gave their students either the option of face-to-face or virtual. There's no hybrid in many of these other districts. So as our students have thought they might be exposed to COVID or were exposed to COVID and had to isolate, they didn't lose their teachers. They simply stayed virtual the days that they might have been face-to-face. In other districts, they cannot easily switch between the virtual environment and the live environment because those staffs are 2 distinct entities. With PV's model, at least students can continue going to school. So I want the public to understand we continue to assess the situation based upon the criterion set forth in the attestation form. We'll proceed to open schools to a greater degree as the criterion in that form are met. Basically, that means for the meantime, we must continue social distancing, wearing masks, washing hands, monitoring infection rates, and await the opportunities for our staff and students who are old enough to be administered the vaccine. And that's an important thing, I think, to understand because based on information that I heard this morning from the county, they're expecting to get about 3,000 doses of the vaccine a week. They have 20,000 healthcare workers who are first in line. So you do the math, that's almost 7 weeks before they get to the next group, which are the chronically ill. And then beyond that, that's when they start to get to police, fire, teachers, those sorts of folks. So the vaccine's coming, but it's probably going to be a while, probably sometime in April, roughly, at the earliest. So, it is not that this board hasn't been thinking about how to open schools. It is that according to the state criterion, we have done the most that we can. And until that criterion changes, and Dr. Russell, again, I'll explain how this works. It has to do not only with your infection rates, but the square footage of your classrooms and matters such as that. So some other matters I think that are worth noting here. that directly correlate to PV's ability to respond to the pandemic. You may not recall, we completely restructured the IT system here at the school district, not just in terms of staffing, but in the actual information systems. They were on their last legs, and had we not done this, we may in fact have not been able to do much of virtual at all, at least with the demands that are placed on the system in their current state. We made sure teachers had double monitors to help, facilitate the conduct of the hybrid teaching model. We attempted to go to one-to-one, and we came pretty close, but supply chains began to fail in school districts nationwide. So I know we're still looking for some laptops. We added a number of mental health supports, both in terms of services and actual staff increases. Prior to the pandemic, the board was actively considering how to add even more mental health staff. And the board has finally begun to be able to return to some of that discussion. This board also wants to remind the community that there are other resources available related to mental health and educational services, as well as to food. No one in this district should feel alone, and if you need services and have not availed your child of them, please reach out to your child's principal or counselor. I mean, we are here to help. Throughout the pandemic, the district provided over $300,000 worth of food to students in school. And we've been fortunate to continue with the Power Packs program, which not only provided food to students, but throughout this time has also done things like clothing drives and collected other essentials. There have been numerous and extensive improvements to safety district-wide that frankly occurred pretty quietly for the most part because they were security matters. But we hired a new safety supervisor, and we replaced, upgraded, and increased security monitoring capabilities throughout all of our buildings, and that was well before the pandemic. We evaluated all the HVAC systems to make sure we were circulating sufficient air and upgraded filters where it was appropriate. We completely recapitalized South Elementary due to both health and infrastructure concerns. And lastly, we as a board have pointed this out before, but I think it bears repeating. Our custodial and food services staff truly stepped up to make sure the buildings were clean and operational, and students and staff could be fed throughout the pandemic. Our teachers, our staff, our administrators did the same with education and other services, and they all should be commended. That said, parents should be commended as well. This has not been an easy time, as some households really struggle with the challenges of the pandemic. And, for those of us that are parents, we know parenting is a hard job. So I want to thank the parents for their efforts to support their children's education throughout these uncertain times. We need everybody doing their part to get us through these events. So again, we'll be monitoring the various factors related to any discussion of reopening. When we meet the criteria set forth in the attestation form, then we'll start to look at moving forward with expanding the scope of schools being open. In the meantime, the board thanks you for your support as we educate and care for the children of our community. And with that, that brings us to section 2.03, the superintendent's report. And I turn things over to you, Dr. Russell.
Thank you, Dr. Hallis. And I do have some slides that I will follow as speaking prompts, and it will echo some of what you have mentioned in your presentation. I do want to go into a little bit more detail about the attestation form. We welcomed our students back on site today, those that are comfortable attending and are a part of the half-day or hybrid models. But I want to talk to you about the what ifs as connected to that attestation form, and I'll get into some of the details as Dr. Hallis mentioned. I'd like to provide you with a vaccine update, along with what's next for PVSD. So we're thinking about aiming for targets moving forward. And again, as mentioned a few minutes ago in board recognition, getting back to that normal we know. So what does that mean? And again, Dr. Hallis has mentioned some of that to you in his presentation. I'll echo and give you a little bit more detail. The other thing I want to bring to the board's attention and the public is I want to take from that Wednesday weekly idea of asynchronous learning days as opposed to inclement weather days, so that we do not extend the calendar, and really invite the board to share their thoughts on that. And also I'll put a plug in there, or plug out there, excuse me, for MLK Day of Service. Ms. McGovern did the same thing. I would like to echo that as well. So I'll move through things, and I try not to be too redundant here. So we have our students that have been in the virtual learning mode for some time. They continue in that virtual learning mode. We welcomed our students back today on site that participate in both our hybrid and our half day. And it was exciting to see our students back. So here are some pictures that give you a sense of what the experiences look like for our students. As Dr. Hallis mentioned, we are obligated to uphold the 6 feet of social distance here in Montgomery County. And of course, our students are required to wear masks and sometimes wear both masks and a face shield. So there was an update from the state in conjunction with their efforts. They collaborate, the state PDE, the Pennsylvania Department of Education, with the Pennsylvania Department of Health. And this chart is one that we've referenced before. It describes for us the criteria that identify the level of community transmission. And for a long time now, we've been in the substantial mode, excuse me, because we have incidence rates that are greater than 100 per 100,000 residents in Montgomery County. And we have a percent positivity that is greater than 10%. And that continues as of the latest data on the Montgomery County website today. For a very long time, up until January 7th, this chart looked different. And the only option that was here in the substantial range was full remote learning model. They recently added the blending learning model, for elementary students only. And that revision was made on January 7th, and an announcement came out from the state this past week. So even though we're in the substantial range, what research is telling us is that our youngest learners are less susceptible to the virus. They're experiencing contracting it, and there is a lack of significant evidence indicating they're also transmitting it, which is why the recommendation came out from PDE. We continue to be in the substantial mode. Now, because many school districts, not only in Montgomery County, but across the Commonwealth, have been in the substantial mode as this pandemic has continued and the circumstances become more severe, many have continued with some amount or level of on-site schooling. So what the state required of us was to sign an attestation form that committed the district to following the requirements of this information here. And let me just quickly go over this. We've talked about it before, but there's a lot to this. So I'd like to bring some clarity to it if it would be helpful. Because now that our students are back on site, it really matters the number of cases of COVID within a rolling 14-day period for our students and staff on site. When they're virtual or when they're home on winter break, it doesn't matter as much. Yes, we've recorded those counts and they're represented on our dashboard, but they do not influence decisions here on the attestation form. There are 3 size schools that are a part of the attestation form. So as Dr. Hallis mentioned, you need to consider the size of the school, the enrollment in the school, and then you need to consider the level of transmission in the community. So here's an example of the chart for medium schools. They have enrollments under normal conditions outside of the pandemic of 500 to 900 students. That's essentially 5 of our 7 schools. Schwanksville would be a small school. The high school would be a large school. So this is an example of a chart driven by the attestation form and the commitment we've made as a school district that tells us what we need to do in the event there are 4 to 6 students or staff that are positive with COVID in our buildings over a 14-day rolling period. And what I want to call to your attention is that we would be required to close school or shift to virtual, maybe not for 3 to 7 days. This disclaimer down here helps us to understand that, but for some number of days, at least 1 is most likely. We will work with the Office of Public Health as well as the Department of Health to determine the appropriate number of days. But please know this is a possibility moving forward, as that burden of virus is pretty heavy around us. Should it come into our schools while our students are attending on site and affect students or staff to this degree, this is the response that we must follow through on. That's the commitment we've made by signing this attestation form. There are FAQs that help us to understand at a deeper level this attestation form. For example, a common question that's been posed to me is, what is a rolling 14-day period? Or if we're coming off of a holiday break and we had cases over the holiday, we observed that on our dashboard. Do we start new with the rolling 14-day window, or do we count those cases from the holiday? We start new as of today. So fresh start, day one of a 14-day rolling period. And how do we determine building size? It's not based on how many students are attending in that half day or hybrid model. It is instead the enrollment we would report outside of the pandemic under quote unquote normal conditions. And again, there are more questions and answers via this link. I pulled out 3 because these 3 questions are ones that have been presented to me sort of often. So I just want to give you a sense of what's available. Last week, we had some comments about the social and emotional health of our students, and we continue to think about that. And again, Dr. Hallis referenced some of the things that we're doing. I did look into some of the detailed data around suicides. It's extremely concerning information, and it is a part of all that we're thinking about as we consider the social and emotional health of students. So for the record, I wanted to provide some information as well as some of the resources and the steps that we take as a school district to support our students with their mental health. We do know that under the circumstances of the pandemic and how we're doing school works for some of our students. Some of them are thriving. If they're in a virtual model or part-time in a virtual model, they appreciate the independence, they like or appreciate a self-directed nature to their learning and the pace. They can sort of control that a little bit. We know that others are not feeling so strong and that they're struggling, they're isolated, they're lonely. Our students are craving that social interaction they're used to, and they may be challenged in their learning academically. So in addition to some of these data that indicate what's occurred in the county, and these data about suicides come from the coroner's office, and there's a link there, there's a website. We take this information very seriously. Any of our students, staff, and community members can access support or help through the Safe to Say system. That's the state's system. It's an anonymous reporting system. Anyone can tap into it, either through the app, making a call, or even through the website, and report a concern about a student or a staff member, and it will be followed up upon by an individual from the state. And that is what occurs if a student reports something about a fellow student, we immediately get a call back from the state, and we follow the steps that we need to follow to check on the student and do what we can do to support. I wanted to call out, since suicide was something we were talking about, we do have a policy on suicide awareness, prevention, and response. It's policy 819. All of our secondary staff are required to undergo suicide awareness training every 5 years, and that's stated in the policy. And as part of the policy, you'll see that there are some resources linked to the policy that help individuals to know some of the considerations we make to support the mental health and wellness of our students. And we also have our health services department. They have a page on our website that, again, provides resources or information about resources our families may choose to tap into to support their children with mental health and wellness. We have placed a strong focus on social and emotional health, introducing new programming a few years ago, looking at programming to add to the middle schools. We continue to evaluate the staff we have in these categories and what the district and our district students might benefit from as we propose new staff. First and foremost, our students depend upon our teachers and their paraprofessionals for those connections, those relationships that allow them to feel comfortable in this very different school setting, as well as to learn. So that's important to call out. Our teachers work diligently to make connections with our students. And that's not only with respect to their academics and their learning, it's with their social and emotional health. We also have a robust team of counselors, social workers. We're very fortunate to have 3 social workers in our district. We have IST, instructional support teams in each of our buildings. Except the high school, we have MTSS, or multi-tiered systems of support teams in all buildings. We have mental health teams, and we have outpatient services. We have psychological services that are afforded to our families out of all of our buildings. So the buildings provide the space. Outside third-party organizations provide the services. And these are services that families can have access to. If they have questions, they can reach out to their child's counselor to learn more. We have SAP teams. These are student assistance programs that support students who may be struggling with drugs or alcohol. We have Creative Health, which is an organization that supports students that may be struggling with drugs or alcohol. And we depend heavily on Montgomery County for the resources it offers our schools. Participating in the PAYS survey, the Pennsylvania Youth Survey, affords us some of those resources at no cost to the district, and we value those. The Safe to Say system is one I mentioned. We've also contracted with an organization called Be a Part of the Conversation in recent years, and they have come into our schools and promoted really sensitive topics that can be challenging to talk about with our children. And they help us navigate these conversations about some of the issues and the challenges our young people are facing today. If you go to our website, you'll see that each of our buildings has an extensive counseling page with resources listed there, contact information, hotlines, phone numbers to resources that might be helpful. We've also done a couple of different things this year, again, recognizing the challenges for so many under the circumstances of the pandemic. We have contracted with an organization called Life After Trauma Organization, LATO. And initially, this group started by supporting teachers. Because teachers work directly with students, we wanted to make sure that if teachers had needs in this area and would benefit from some support for their social and emotional health, their well-being, that we offered it. Because their interactions with students certainly pays off for students when they're feeling well. Next, LATO will move on to supporting parents, and we're getting ready to communicate that information. And then they will offer support to interested students. So this is a really different approach for us, a new organization and partner that we've developed that we're really pleased with, and the work that's been conducted in support of our different stakeholder groups. We've also contracted with a group called Integrate for Good that focuses primarily on supporting some of our special education students at the high school and helping to prepare them for what comes next in this very different world right now. We've contracted with Ms. Jerry Brown, who is a consultant. She's working specifically with high school students and working with students so that they have a voice to share concerns that are connected to diversity or diversity awareness, equity of opportunity, inclusivity, not feeling marginalized in the school setting. So we're appreciative of Ms. Jerry Brown. We also are working with Mr. Arthur Mitchell. He works with staff. Ms. Brown works with our students. And our administration really attempts to reach out to students and meets with them on occasion to, again, hear their voices and learn from them firsthand what's going well and what's maybe not going as well. And of course, we continue to offer extracurricular activities and afford our students participation in athletics, music ensembles, and clubs. Many of them are run virtually. However, it does provide our students with an outlet and hopefully activities that support them feeling engaged in the school setting. So I wanted to follow up and just provide a little bit more detail about some of the efforts that the district is putting forth to support the social and emotional well-being of our students, as well as our staff and parents. Exciting news, we had our first school nurse vaccinated last week, and we have a large portion of the group scheduled to be vaccinated tomorrow. So Dr. Hallis mentioned this, our nurse from South Elementary, Mrs. Kristen Kievny, was vaccinated last week. She somehow got an appointment before the others. We're really excited about getting these wheels in motion, so to speak. Not sure of the timing. As Dr. Hallis mentioned, there are questions as we move through phase 1A into phase 1B. It does appear as if there is the possibility that some of our additional staff will be added to phase 1A along with our nurses. The bulk of our educators are a part of phase 1B, and we're looking forward to getting to that phase and the distribution of vaccine to those listed in that phase. So hope is on the horizon, and this will certainly support our efforts to maintain that healthy school environment. So what's next for PV? I know that there are questions out there about what happens next and how do we get back to that normal we know. Well, for right now, we're going to continue to follow the guidelines of the attestation form because we're committed to doing that. We're obligated to do that. We meet weekly, either Mrs. Lewis or myself, with representatives from the Office of Public Health. Montgomery County provides heavy guidance to the school districts in Montgomery County around how they're doing school. And we also have conversations with representatives from the Pennsylvania Department of Health. We also talk to, you've heard me mention Dr. David Rubin of CHOP. So we learn a lot from these guiding individuals and these agencies, and we follow their advice. We're looking forward to the opportunities to be vaccinated. There are a lot of people excited about that. At an upcoming Wellness Committee meeting on January 20th, we'll talk more about health and safety updates, how things are going in school. This tends to be the setting where we talk about health and safety in our school, particularly as it connects to the pandemic. And then how do we plan for school schedules moving forward? What are the criteria we need to consider as we think about moving out of the conditions or the circumstances of the pandemic? So as Dr. Hallis mentioned, there are still certain rules we must uphold and follow before we can bring students back into that 5-day-a-week traditional model. However, there are conversations starting to happen about the criteria that support something that might look different from what we have in place now. For example, the high school is contemplating a shift in the hybrid model it currently runs that has 3 groups in it to possibly 2 groups. And Dr. Moss has sent out a survey to parents to learn from them what they would want to commit to for the 3rd marking period. Because if too many students commit to the hybrid model and we can't maintain that social distance with 2 groups, we have to rethink that. So that 6 feet of social distance is still something we are obligated to uphold. But we'll talk about the other criteria that we need to consider as we wonder about adjustments to the current hybrid and half-day models moving forward. And we'll couch those conversations under some planning, or at least the introduction to conversations about planning for 2nd semester and the upcoming school year. And this will be run as a Zoom webinar. So this is also represented on our calendar. If you're interested in attending, interested to hear your thoughts. So let me shift, if I can, to asynchronous learning and inclement weather days. This is a conversation that some of our administration and teaching staff had, and in an effort to avoid extending the school year, there's been conversation about asynchronous learning days as opposed to using more of the inclement weather days as true snow days, which we can do. We did that with that first one. And as I mentioned very briefly in public, in advance of that storm, we weren't ready to go to an asynchronous learning day on an inclement weather day, and we wanted to afford our students the experience of that snowstorm. So I'm interested in thoughts from the board, if you have them, about whether or not we should consider continuing along that path where we would rely upon, I think we have 1 day left built into the calendar for inclement weather days, or we should think about maybe any future days being instructional learning days, because we have that flexibility this year. And if we think back to surveys that we've administered, and it's been some years, some number of years rather, the number one priority on the part of people that respond tends to be to finish the year as early as possible. So that was really what prompted the conversations here. And we have the flexibility to organize learning on these days so that they don't have to be a total shutdown. However, we still have at least 1 day built into the calendar, and we can use that as an inclement weather day in the event, and I hear there may be a snowstorm out there coming next week, in the event we experience another inclement weather day. So I'm not sure if the board would like to weigh in at all. I'd like to give you a few minutes or so here to share your thoughts if you have them. Mrs. Smith and I would be very interested.
Well, I know Mrs. Lofton has her hand up, so.
Thank you, Dr. Hallis. I do have a couple of thoughts about this. I know, so Dr. Russell, I know that you mentioned that in previous years, the goal was to end the school year as early as possible. And, we've already pushed well past where we initially were planning to be ending the school year due to moving the start of the school year. So we're already ending late, and I do recognize that. However, this year is so different from all other years, and what I'm hearing from people the most is that they want as much in-person instruction as possible if they are opting for that mode of instructional delivery. I hate to see us adding more days onto the end of the school year, especially since our seniors are still graduating on June 11th, and things will hopefully be starting up once we get into June. However, there's a couple of reasons why I'm hesitant to be switching to virtual. The first is that a snow day is a beautiful thing to a child, and we've lost so much this year for our students from what they typically experience in a regular school year that I hate taking away the magic of a snow day from our children. But the other part of this that I'm particularly concerned about is the impact of virtual learning on our special education students. And in talking with families that I know with students who do have special education needs, the impact of switching to a virtual day can really be we use the phrase that they have difficulty learning, but what that looks like in practical application is really pretty extreme for what I know that families go through when their student is overwhelmed with the frustrations that are associated, if they're just not a student who can adapt to that kind of environment. So, I would suggest that we attempt to have snow days. I mean, I guess, if we're closed, it depends on how much snow, if we have a blizzard with 3 feet of snow and we're going to be closed for 3 days, it's a little bit different than a 1 day snow day. And where, or if I would like to see us at least use the days that we have already built into the calendar before we switch to implementing virtual learning days instead of snow days.
Thank you, Mrs. Lofton. Mrs. Smith, can you clarify for me, do we have 1 inclement weather day left or 2?
We have 2 left.
Okay, that's what I thought. But
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to see us maybe use those before we have to shift to a virtual day, because I know it's nice to have the kids have something that they can do where they can actually just have a fun surprise. and especially this year. And then I really do have concerns about some families really having a difficult time adapting to the virtual, especially for our low incidence students who are having full-time in-person instruction.
Thank you. Very helpful. And just as a point of reference, the calendar right now and the days that you see on the screen represented, the circle over the 21st represents the last day of school for students. That is with those 3 days built into the calendar being taken as snow days.
Oh, well, okay. So if we ended on the 8th, thank you for calling that out, because I was looking at the 22nd and 23rd as the snow days. Okay, so I mean, if we ended on the 18th, it would really be unfortunate to have the last day of school be a Monday for our students. I imagine many students won't be there that day. But at least one more snow day before we get into that phase of decision making, I would hope.
Okay, helpful. Thank you.
Then Mrs. Mayers, Dr. Kolar, and then Ms. McGovern, please.
Hi, thank you. It's okay. I just wanted to state real quickly, I completely agree with almost everything you said, Mrs. Lofton, and the difficulty. My concern would be that as a district, we're looking at offering more educational opportunities during the summer to our students who are low incidence. I believe I know Title I, and then possibly other students. So having the school year go later, sorry, it's okay. I have family issues going on. I'm almost done. So that concerns me just from looking at the calendar. So I'm not weighing in. I just know that you all are also taking that into, looking at that. And I would like to hear also what the administration, what side you were, or what your thought is to moving forward. Thank you so much. I'll be off camera for about 15 minutes.
Thank you, Mrs. Mayers.
I think I was next, so I'm going to jump in. I think I misunderstood, because when we initially adjusted the calendar back at the end of the summer, I thought one of the things we had talked about in terms of pushing back the start day was that we could recoup part of that in the 3 inclement weather days. So I was actually kind of surprised when we had the snow day. Was it last month or the month before? So I was kind of thinking the opposite of some of the things that have been mentioned. We did have the 1 snow day. It was fun. I think kids appreciate it, but I wondered if the other 2 that we still have, we could switch over to inclement weather days, because again, as Mrs. Mayers just pointed out, I was thinking it just really cuts into summer programming, summer vacations, like was mentioned, seniors are graduating. So I was kind of hoping that since we had 1 snow day, that was kind of the one fun day for the kids, and maybe any future ones could switch to virtual. And then this is jumping the gun a little bit, but we had started talking about next year's calendar, and there's some issues with where holidays fall, and do we start earlier or later? And I wonder if this could be a workaround for that too, that if we do have to start later, maybe again, we could recoup some of that time in June by avoiding building in 3 snow days, maybe build in 1 and then have 2 backup virtual days, because I do think we should keep 1 in our back pocket in case we have power issues or internet issues or whatever. But I'm not sure that we need to reserve 3 days for that purpose with this technology that we have now.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kolar. Helpful.
So I think I was next, and I just wanted to point out, like, if it's all right, I know no one wants to spend, trust me, as many more days in school as we have to, especially as a senior graduating. But I do agree with Mrs. Lofton that there is, so if we had to go to an asynchronous learning day, I would just hope maybe that there would be some kind of compromise we could do where it's almost, if this makes sense, a half day's worth of work. So that way you could get still time to play in the snow, take a break, sleep in, and get that magic snow day feel. And you weren't overwhelmed by asynchronous work, but there was still some that provided learning. You know, if it's a day that you can just do notes and that's in class and you're done, that would be a day we would ask teachers to do that. I don't know if that would be something we could do, but I think it would help both students and teachers.
Thank you.
And then Mrs. Evans-Brockett, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Hallis. I just wanted to bring up, I know that it's been a concern of parents for our AP classes because those exams are set. So as if we have more snow days, that's less instructional time our AP students get before they have to take their exam. So just to keep that in mind as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, you have provided us with some very helpful feedback, albeit somewhat divided. However, Mrs. Smith and I will continue with some conversations and we'll follow up with you, but I really appreciate the points that you've raised. And they certainly align to some of the other feedback we've received. Anything else on this topic from anyone before we move on? Okay. And Ms. McGovern mentioned January 18th, is the MLK Day of Service that PV hosts every year. And I called out some of the wonderful events that are being organized. And Mrs. Lester has prepared a website with some of the opportunities, and they look a little different this year because it is a different year. However, they're really kind of neat in their design, and we're really hoping our students partake. Again, Ursinus College continues to reach out to us and wants to partner with us, and they're offering some nice opportunities and inviting our students and our community to participate. So I also wanted to call that out for everyone. So we're looking forward to great things from our students for our community on the MLK Day of Service. So I appreciate Mrs. Lester's work as well as the committee that works closely with her on organizing this day. Thank you, Dr. Hallis.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. And that brings us to item 2.04, the solicitor's report. Mr. Subers?
Mr. House, I have no report.
Okay, thank you. Item 2.05 is board and district committee reports. Do any board members have anything to report out? I just have one brief thing that I should have addressed earlier, but I didn't. If there's someone interested in replacing me on the Regional Planning Commission, please step forward. It's, I can give you details about exactly what happens. Usually I and Dr. Russell try to attend, and we're sort of participant observers. We're non-voting members, but it is an important committee in terms of finding out sometimes what's happening in the district in terms of building and some other things. That have an impact upon school enrollment and some of our other school planning. So that's it, unless someone else has something to offer. Okay, and I see Mrs. Mayor's hands up. She forgot to lower it before she signed off. So she just did it. So, okay. So with that, if there's nothing else, section 3, comments and consent agenda. Comments on any agenda item are accepted from the audience at this time. So item 3.01, and there have been some hands up. Mr. Ganesh, if you would, in this order,
Yes.
McGinn, Gale, Kendall.
Mrs. McGinn? Mrs. McGinn, can you please unmute yourself and speak? All right, moving on to the next person. Mr. Gale?
Yes, thank you. The stated goal of any lockdown or forced hybrid over full-time is to stop the spread of the virus. Please show us a single study that shows locking down or preventing full-time attendance in the schools does that. In fact, we can see with our own data in our own community, the spread is actually higher when locked out of school because the children congregate without the mitigation efforts and they cause higher numbers. We can see the evidence of this in the emails that came out while the schools were locked down. Clearly, they did not contract it via school. And again, we've had only 5 transmissions in the entire county to date, given by the county commissioner herself, Val Arkush. Given there is virtually zero spread in the schools, there is only one possible benefit of reducing something that is already not happening. So that being the baseline, let's look at the consequences of locking them down and weighing them against the already known virtually zero spread. Underprivileged children, specifically Black, brown, and minorities, are missing their ability to eat proper meals at school, sometimes the only nutritious meal of the day for them. The same at-risk group is also lacking proper technological abilities to maintain grades virtually. The social interactions and needs of the students, specifically in the preteen to senior levels, is suffering. We've already lost 8 teens in Montgomery County this year since March, and that's only in a short time frame. There have been very specific references to school lockdowns and a major factor in the notes that they have left behind. In fact, there was a pact among 6 children in our very district in which the entire board here is aware of, and yet they claim they do things about it, but yet they actually did nothing. There was nothing sent out about it, no notification to any parents, no district-wide notice, no nothing. Not a darn thing was done. The danger to the community is something tragic almost took place. How many more dead children are acceptable to this board? I'd like to know the number of when it's okay to accept them being less important than the spread of a virus that is actually not spreading in the schools. The students of special needs and IEPs are also virtually impossible to be met when they're done virtually. This is a known significant damage to an already at-risk population. Again, we'd like to know the number of how many students that are not having the special needs met are less important and acceptable to the board to stop potential spread. Students who are normally top performers are falling through the cracks in significant numbers. This is going to impact them for the rest of their lives, from not qualifying for advanced classes in the future to not performing upcoming levels and needs for the college courses of their choice. How many students' futures need to be ruined and is acceptable to the board over a stopping spread of a virus that is not spreading in the schools? Students are turning to drug abuse and addictions in record high numbers when locked out of school. How many students' futures need to be ruined and is acceptable to the board to stop potential spread of a virus that is not spreading in the schools? Child abuse is primarily reported by the teachers, particularly the same vulnerable population I referenced above. When they are locked down and forced virtual in any capacity, they are
30 seconds remaining.
Not reported. A local child has brain damage now because the mother had to go to work and she was not behaving over the screen. The boyfriend almost beat her to death. How many more children need to be beaten and is acceptable to the board to stop the spread of potential virus? As you can see from above, the potential gain is only to stop a virus that is scientifically not shown to spread in the school, as Dr. Russell herself even said, as well as high transmissions when locked out of school, has a 99.5% survival rate for the people who could potentially contract it in our schools, and scientifically known not to spread within children as much as the older population.
Okay, Mr. Ganesh, if you would do Mr. Kendall and then Lichtenstein.
Yes. Mr. Kendall? Right, moving on to the next person.
I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. I wanted to start by saying whoever is sighing and groaning while we're speaking, please stop. It's fairly distracting. So I just want to talk about what you have posted on your website with respect to the attestation form that Dr. Russell showed us earlier. And it says here, on November 23rd, 2020, in an effort to mitigate COVID-19 transmission in the Commonwealth, Governor Tom Wolf directed schools operating at levels of county substantial transmission to either shift all learning to remote/virtual or submit a signed attestation form, which outlines how schools are, your word, required to adhere to aggressive mitigation measures. PDE, the state's word, recommendations for responding to COVID-19 cases. So I just want to make it clear that these are not requirements, they are recommendations. And if I go and I look at that attestation form, here's what it says. All or some of the students within the public school entity are currently receiving in-person instruction, and 1, we have read the updated order of the Secretary of the Pennsylvania Department of Health requiring universal face coverings effective November 18th, 2020, including necessary exceptions and associated guidance, and affirm the public school entity is complying and will continue to comply with and enforce the updated order of the Secretary of the Pennsylvania Department of Health requiring universal face coverings, including necessary exceptions and associated guidance. Now, I've looked at that guidance. That guidance refers to face coverings. Number two, we have read and agreed to follow the recommendations for pre-K to 12 schools following identification of a case or cases of COVID-19 when cases of COVID-19 occur within the public school entity. Now, that's about transmission, like, tracking cases. Neither of these things is, that big recommendations list that you were showing us. These are the actual requirements. So I just want to make it clear to everyone, the things that you claim to be requirements and where you say, we have to do these things, these are our only options. The state is not mandating these things. These are things that you are deciding to choose to use, and that's okay, but stop using words like required and only option, because that's not true. It's actually really misleading. Thank you. I yield my time.
This is Jackie Lichtenstein.
Hi, my name is Jackie Lichtenstein, and I live in Skippack Township. And I would like to thank the board for all of their hard work this year. Everything that has had to go into planning to get our kids back to school hybrid has been really impressive. I thank you for signing the attestation form and sticking to it and adhering to the facts. And so far, I truly believe that the reason why we have not had spread in the schools is because the hybrid form has been working. And that's because you've been keeping the numbers low. We stick to the 6 feet apart and wearing our masks. I know personally people in the other districts that have been mentioned in surrounding, our surrounding areas. And I know that they are not accurate in their reporting, that there are things they are not telling the public about how many cases they've had. And I want to thank everybody for, because if you're as frustrated as I am for having to listen to the same rants over and over again at every meeting, you're troopers for staying focused and staying the course. So anyway, again, thank you for the board. I appreciate it. And Dr. Russell for everything you've been doing to keep the kids in school for hybrid. It's been going really well. Thank you.
Dana.
Good evening. My name is Dana D'Amico. I live in Schwenksville, and I have 2 children that attend Evergreen Elementary, grades 4 and 5. I feel as though the hybrid plan worked well as a temporary short-term fix. However, now is the time to start planning so we can give our children what they need and deserve, which is full-time traditional education. I'm an ICU nurse currently caring for COVID patients, so I fully understand the severity of COVID. However, I am completely confident that the school is a safe place for our children. The emotional, mental, and academic struggles that my children and many other children are dealing with is unacceptable and detrimental. I ask you, Dr. Russell, and the board to please begin preparing and planning for the return of full-time so we can make the second half of the school year the best for our children. I am not expecting this to happen overnight, but it must happen this school year and the planning must start now. Thank you.
Mr. Ganesh, I believe it was Rudolph and then Seibel was the order.
Seibel.
Hi, I'm Christian Seibel. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, my name is Christian Seibel, and I'm a virtual student at Perkiomen Valley High School. I'm speaking today because over the last few weeks, we have all been hearing a lot of extremely loud, frankly incoherent arguments. These views seem to be shouted on the behalf of all the students in the district, saying that it's the students who need our schools to open back up. I'm here to say that these individuals do not speak for all of us. My peers and I have been able to do very well despite virtual schooling. My teachers have been extremely understanding of the difficult situation, and the curriculum has been working very well despite the circumstances. To start, all of my teachers have been so supportive and approachable since the beginning of the school year. They have been understanding and have made clear to everyone that if they need help, just ask. Not only that, but teachers have found ways to make school work well right now. From virtual labs to classroom discussions using tools teachers have independently found to suit our needs, everything has been tailored to keep students interested while school is being taught in this unorthodox way. I'm not saying all of it's perfect, but it is necessary, and it is being executed fantastically for what it is. Now, I won't spend too much time on this because we all know that the other speakers will deny it, but this is all extremely crucial. Dr. Russell and the board aren't keeping us home because they want to. It's not fun for them. They're doing it to keep us safe. The death rate is not extraordinarily high, but it is not none, and we do not even know what the long-term effects of this virus are. The board and administration are doing what they need to do to keep our students and teachers healthy. To bring everyone back right now to traditional schooling would be objectively both unsafe and unethical. No one would rather be virtual than in person, but it's what we need to do to ensure our district's safety so that we can return as soon as it is possible. So yes, people are yelling loudly. They're screaming at the board, repeating the same faulty statistics and anecdotes over and over again. But they don't speak for all of us. They don't speak for those of us who have parents in healthcare, who are risking their lives every day to save others. They don't speak for those of us who have parents or grandparents that are at risk, loved ones that could die if they contract COVID. They don't speak for the vast majority of us who understand that it will hurt people if we foolishly rush back to get back to traditional schooling without ensuring safety first. So I just want to thank you all, the board, Dr. Russell, and especially all of the teachers who have worked so incredibly hard to help students succeed under these difficult yet necessary circumstances. You have to put up with so much, but it is appreciated. Thank you. I yield my time.
Mrs. Rudolph.
Hi, thank you. I don't have anything written or prepared. I'm just speaking. So last week I spoke and I wanted to comment afterwards because I heard your responses to my comment, but I was not called upon again. So what I wanted to say is that my whole point was that there is no agenda to discuss the planning for returning to full time. There is no agenda. There's no like proper place to discuss it. So I'm not talking about should we go back, when, how, what's it going to look like? Oh my God, the case numbers, killing grandma. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about we need an agenda. We need an actual agenda so that in the meetings, we can have all of these conversations, and the people that are so terrified and want to spread fear and don't want the schools open, I'm sure they will get on there and they will say their part. But I'm not going to speak to any of that and killing grandma right now. I'm a frontline healthcare worker myself, so I work with grandmas, and you know, they do well. And they're not to say there's not a pandemic or, you know, COVID isn't real. Certainly it is. I'm saying we need to talk about getting these kids a plan to return. We need an agenda to discuss it for all sides, those who want to keep the school shut down and those who want to move forward. We can discuss it all. I'm saying we need an agenda, and then we can have that conversation instead of talking about having a conversation. Let's actually make an agenda so we can discuss all of the concerns that everybody has. So I've heard last week that the things that came up after I spoke were, oh, I haven't been at the other meetings. Okay, that was in the past. Oh, they did so wonderful. All the other districts were talking about how wonderful our plan was. The thing with the plan is that it ended at hybrid, and the parents did not know that the plans ended at hybrid. So I have been trying to be very active in letting the parents know that the plans ended at hybrid, and now we need to make a new goal to talk about the future. So we need an agenda so that we can have these conversations about the future. So all these talks about, oh, you're putting up with this and you guys did great. I know you want praise for the past, and I can give you praise for the hybrid, but now it's time to move forward. I still have 27 seconds. I want an agenda to be able to talk about the plan to move forward. And I'm going to just keep bringing it up that we need an agenda where we can have all of these conversations for everybody who has something to say about it and put it in one place, the agenda for the planning to return to full time. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Ganesh, I believe it was
Yeah,
Pamela, and if you could please state your last name when you speak to, and then Mr. Saylor.
Yes, thank you. Hi, my name is Pamela DiStefano. Can you hear me?
yes, we can.
I am from Schwenksville, and I have two children at the high school. I don't have anything written, but I'm just calling for a little bit of clarification and also to sort of reiterate what the last caller spoke to. I would also really like to just advocate for an agenda to discuss planning for full-time in person. Of course, everyone's going to be coming at this from how it is directly impacting them. I have two children, and one of them is just totally fine with the virtual hybrid model. And I have another child who has an IEP, and he is struggling tremendously. So I'm just asking for some transparency to the parents to be able to know if that discussion is going to happen for full time in person, because if not, other decisions need to be made. For me personally, like I need to find an alternative school to put my child in because he's really not thriving in the virtual hybrid model. A few other things I was hoping maybe we could clear up. I spoke to Dr. Russell a few weeks ago, and she had mentioned she was going to go and actually speak to people at Souderton, and I forget if it was Wissahickon, but there was one other district, to get some ideas to implement back into Perkiomen Valley to get this full-time in person, able to get up and running and able to at least be a discussion that we can be working towards. So I'm really hoping that that's what we are working towards. I also wanted to get a little bit of clarification on the 3 to 6 feet thing. I was under the impression that the distance was 3 feet if the people are all masked up. If that's incorrect, maybe somebody could just let me know. What else did I want to say? Yeah, I can't express deeply enough how detrimental this has been, even to my child who's doing well in the virtual hybrid model, but especially to my IEP child who is just struggling to succeed in any way. And these are years that they're not going to be able to get back. So I'm just imploring you to have an agenda to discuss planning for full-time in person. Thanks for your time.
Mr. Jason Saylor.
Hi, this is Jason Saylor from Skipback, Pennsylvania. I want to first thank the board and thank the school district for all they're doing. I want to, we always talk about following the statistics and following the science. We know that the edict of a public school district is that all kids have the opportunity to get the same learning. And that's not happening. And we also know there have actually been hundreds of studies that have been done. There's not one child in our school district right now that is doing well. My son is an honor roll student. He's a straight A student. He's not doing well because kids should not be in a room by themselves in front of a computer for 8 hours a day. So there's not one person who can scientifically say they're doing well. You could talk to any psychiatrist or psychiatrist will tell you that what we're doing to our kids is going to leave some type of mental lasting imprint. Doing surveys is what I do for a living and conducting research and polling. And spending capital to do research and getting information from your constituents is great, only if you're going to follow that. When the school district does a survey and gets data and doesn't follow that, that starts to lead to anger. What we have seen over the past few months are parents wanting to know when their children can get back to school. And there's just no answer to that. We might not see our kids get back to school all this year and potentially in September because there's no committee that's put aside to when that's going to happen. And it's important that the board and the school district and the community come together to put a path forward for when that happens. And honesty is that best approach. We can't keep hiding from the question that parents want to know of when our children are going to be back at school. At some point, the board is going to have to tell the parents the truth, that they don't want their kids back at school because the union doesn't want to have the teachers back in school, and they might not be able to staff the school. What I would request is a survey done with the people that work for the school district. And the question would be, as of February 1st, if you were instructed to be in school full time, would you show up to your job? That's the first step that needs to happen so the parents can really understand, is there a possibility of getting their children back at school? There should be a goal set, and that goal should be come April 1st, 30 seconds. Thank you. I appreciate it. Come April 1st, we're going back to full time. Every kid will be in school. Secondarily to that, just like what's happening in the workforce, you have to figure out now, how do you, for the people that like being from home, how do you get them back in the school district, back in the school system? There are hard questions that need to be answered, and I'm very confident that this board can stop ignoring these questions and start answering them if we all put our minds together. And there's help from the parents that want to help as well.
Dr. Hallis, no more
Yep,
hands.
I'm not seeing any more hands. So that brings us to item 3.02. Recommended action is to approve the consent agenda as developed January 4th, 2021. Items that represent standard routine business of the board are included in the consent agenda. If there's any item that a board member would like to have removed from the consent agenda developed in January 4th, 2021 and placed back into the regular agenda for questions or discussions, the consent agenda includes, and the items are listed there. So there's a motion to approve the consent agenda. Anyone want to remove anything?
I second Dr. Hallis.
Well, someone else has to do it. I just said there's a motion that I put the motion on.
I so move.
Okay. And then we've got a second, a motion and a second. So motion's on the floor, and those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. With that, we get to section 4, education. Dr. Kolar, if you would, please.
Thank you, Dr. Hallis. Item 4.01, comments from the audience are accepted on education. Mr. Ganesh, we have 2 hands raised. If you could take over, please.
Sure. Mr. Gale?
Yes, thank you. A plan to fully reopen the schools for those who choose to needs to be put in place now. Even the state guidance was recently updated to reflect the position for elementary students as the default position of the districts. It is also on the top agenda listed by not only any state governments, but on the top agenda of the incoming presidential administration of Biden. Given the overwhelming success of Souderton and Wissahickon, we can see how this can extend up to the higher grade levels as well. We need to stop patting ourselves on the backs for the efforts done in September and make progress, be leaders, and open up to the schools for those who choose so. We hear from the ones who love full-time virtual, and we are happy with their success and wish them that continued success. We are not asking for them to be forced into school. To that point, there is nothing that would affect them for those who choose to remain fully virtual. They can still have that choice, and it will not affect grandma or anybody else at home. There is no difference to the fully virtual. That being said, the board needs to stop capitulating to the vocal but minority crowd of fully virtual. We are not asking to force any child into the schools, and as such, those who choose to remain fully virtual not only open up room for others to attend full time, they also have no relevant bearing to this conversation. Our actions do not affect them, and as such, they should be disregarded in this conversation here. All staff, from janitors to teachers to the administrators, are able to work in the buildings with proper PPE with minimal but acceptable risk. We know this because A, we've already shown virtually zero spread in the schools, not only in our district, but throughout the county. Per the County Commissioner of Ala Cruz herself, there's only been 5 known transmissions out of roughly 100,000 students. If doctors, nurses, janitors, and the full staff of hospitals, the place where people specifically flock to when they have COVID, are safe with proper mitigation efforts, so will our staff. The youngest person in the entire county to pass from COVID is 34. That is roughly the mean age of our staff. The median age of the COVID deaths in Montgomery County is 73. There was a 99.5% survival rate for the overwhelming majority of our staff, and so they contracted, unfortunately. Children do not contract it as easy. We know this, and the superintendent's even admitted that. They are by far and away the least possible spreaders of the virus out of any group. The families with members at risk at home are already aware and know how to isolate. Given that the basis to close the schools has been based mostly entirely upon community spread and transmission, we need to use actual data and science. When making such serious decisions, the prison and the retirement homes need to be removed from these numbers. We know that they are in a different population setting and they are spreading like wildfire due to the lack of ability to socially distance as well as the vulnerability of the population. This is not reflective of the greater community at whole and needs to be removed. The stated goal of any lockdown or forced hybrid is full-time to stop the spread of the virus. Please show us a single study that shows locking down or preventing full-time attendance in the schools does that. In fact, we can see with our own data in our community, the spread is actually higher when they are locked out of the school because children congregate without the mitigation efforts and they cause higher numbers. We can see the evidence of this in emails that came out while the schools were locked down. Clearly, the children not contracted via school. Again, we've only had 5 transmissions in the entire county. Given there's virtually zero spread in the school, and that is the only possible benefit, reduced spread is something that is not happening.
This is Donna Rodolph.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I would like to ask that the agenda items that were removed, that things that we no longer need to discuss, if we could replace them with a new agenda item. And the new agenda item that I'm asking for is a planning pathway towards reopening the school so that we can properly discuss anything and every possible thing around that topic. Thank you. I give up the rest of my time.
This is Jackie Lichtenstein.
Hi, this is Jackie Lichtenstein again from Skipback Township. And I'm just making a comment based on the last 2 people who commented. And it's in regards to all the stats that they're supposedly quoting. I just want to say that on social media, they've both been saying that they don't agree with, saying that they've been out of the state when they've taken trips. So I just thought I'd like to throw that out there. And this is precisely why we need to maintain the 6 feet rule, the mask wearing, and cannot rush the kids back into school. It is because, like a board member once said, that they can't trust the public. It's because we are not worthy of being trusted, because people like that will just keep on doing whatever they want, living the way that they want, and are not willing to accept any responsibility. Thank you.
It's Heather Hoy.
Hi, I am Heather Hoy. I have a kindergartner in Skipback. I kind of want to comment to the last comment too about not being able to trust the public. If you are scared and you don't want your children in school, keep them home. No one's asking anyone to send their kids to school. We're asking for getting our kids back in school full time to be put on an agenda. This doesn't work unless the people doing virtual at home and they're doing well stay home and do the virtual. Everybody can't go back. No one's asking for that. If you don't want to be back, keep your kid home and let them keep thriving virtual. I mean, I have a niece that has been on suicide watch because she can't take the isolation and the virtual is killing her. And we're just supposed to accept this. It's so disheartening that there's such a big group of kids that are just totally being looked over. And with a virus that has a 99% survival rate that doesn't affect the kids, it just doesn't, it makes no sense to me that these kids are just being so overlooked. Like I said, if you don't want to be your kids in school, stay home. If they're doing great with virtual, stay home. But let us have the choice to send our kids back full time, and let's get it on the agenda so we can start making plans to do so. Thank you.
This is Betsy Stone.
Hi, my name's Betsy Stone. I live in Skippack Township. I have a daughter at the high school, and my other daughter is in 7th grade at Middle School East. I wanted to speak mostly about my 7th grade daughter. She has a 504. She has ADHD as well as learning differences, and her team at Middle School East, Spartan team, Mr. DeLucia, Mrs. Chesin, Mrs. Yerkes, Mrs. Vu, as well as her tech and innovations teacher, Mrs. Gottschall, and she just finished the vector of art with Mr. Bernholt. They have been amazing, absolutely amazing. She has differences, and it's hard enough teaching a kid with a 504, and they've really we've been a team. They have helped me. This situation is unprecedented. Not since 1918 have we been in this situation. And when my daughter struggles, I know I can reach out to them and they can give me suggestions and they can give me help. And they are incredible. In addition, Erin McMonigal, the counselor at Middle School East, has been amazing. And I can't speak enough to how much the staff and the students and the teachers, everything they are doing to work with everybody. And if you want the help, they are always there for it. And I don't know, maybe I go into this a little differently than some parents. I know the struggles my daughter has. I know the issues she has, not just this year, but this is previous. And I really just wanted to speak to how amazing all of these teachers have been in helping her, in working with her, in working with me. I don't think any of them thought they'd hear so much, at the middle school level from a parent, but they've given me such great, suggestions and ideas and ways to work with them. And I just can't speak enough to how incredible everything has been. And I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of just how much the teachers are putting into this. And thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs.
Mr. Gale?
Pamela? Sorry.
Okay, go ahead. Well, I think it's one comment per section, I think is what we've been doing. Am I correct in that, Mr. Shuvers?
I'm sorry, the current public comment section is silent on that, but the board does have the discretion to limit public comment in the event that there's not enough time in order to complete its ordinary business. So a one comment per section limitation would not be unreasonable.
Okay. Then let's do that. And, because there will be other opportunities to comment. So I believe each of the three people with their hands up has already commented on this section once already.
Dr. Harris, I don't think Mrs. Pamela had it.
Okay. So then let's let her go. And then we'll, unless there's somebody different after her, then we'll go forward. Thank you.
Mrs. Pamela?
Yes, hi. I just wanted to basically concur with what the last two parent comments were, just reiterating the need
Sorry,
for...
can you state your name and your municipality?
Yes, sure. I'm sorry about that. My name is Pamela DiStefano, and I'm in Perkiomen Township, Schwenksville, Perkiomen Township.
You did speak already. Is that true, Pamela?
I did speak tonight, yes.
Okay, during this education section?
No, during the section prior.
Okay, fair enough. I'm so sorry. I just want to be fair to everybody. Thank you so much.
That's okay. Nope, I understand. I'm just calling to just wanting to comment to concur with the last two comments made, just reiterating the need for in-person schooling for certain students. And I do understand that virtual is working well for a lot of the kids out there. And we're not trying to say that, all kids need to be forced back to school or try to make anybody, do anything that they're uncomfortable with. But I just really want to just emphasize the need to have an agenda, a topic to get ready to discuss the planning for full-time opening of the schools, at least to be able to have that on the agenda so that parents can have a way forward to decide what they're going to do for their children's education. Because just, again, I know I've said this before, my son has an IEP. It is heartbreaking as a parent to watch your child flounder and struggle when they were doing so well. I want to also concur with the last parent that spoke. Our teachers are doing an amazing job. My son has had some of the greatest teams of teachers that really care, that are going out of their way last year, this year as well. That said, he is still not in a position where he's effectively learning. We have internet problems. I have a hotspot that I got from the school that I'm just trying to, we're trying to work out so many different things here. And it's just, it's not conducive to learning for one of my children. My other son is doing okay. He's not doing great. I mean, he's doing okay academically, we'll say that. But, certainly this is an ideal learning environment for anyone. So I just want to, again, just emphasize the need to have the items put on the agenda to at least begin planning to open schools back up to in-person for the kids who need it. And like I said, I know my son really does need it. It would, it's just been really a very difficult thing. These are years that he's not going to get back. And there's just a fundamental base of education that he's really missing out on. So I just really would implore you to get that planning on the agenda. Thanks.
Dr. Kola.
Okay.
Sorry. It looks like we're ready to move on from comments. Moving on to item 4.02, the education update was presented on January 4th. 4.03, the enrollment report was also presented on January 4th. Items 4.04, 4.05, and 4.06 are all on the consent agenda. So that concludes my section.
Thank you, Dr. Kohler. And before moving on to Mr. Dorr, I just want to make a quick point of clarity, because the public seems to be under the perception that these board meetings are a time for debate. There has been talk of reopening schools, and the two committees that really handle that are Health and Wellness and Safety and Operations. So to think that this hasn't been on the board's mind, I just want the public to understand that's not the case. But if you're judging it by the board meeting here, last week's was a business board meeting to bring up all the things that the board has to address on a monthly basis, and as well as obviously new business. And that these are actually the working meetings, the meetings where discussion occurs about the matters that folks are bringing up occurs much more often at the committee level. So I just want that understood, just so the public doesn't think we're sort of brushing those comments aside. This is not the typical format for that kind of debate, and that's not the makings of the Perkiomen Valley School District. We have to follow Pennsylvania law in terms of how meetings operate, and that's what we do. So I just want that understood and wanted to comment on it so it didn't hang out there. And with that, if I could turn to section 5, Mr. Dorr, if you would, please.
Thank you, Dr. Hallis. 5.01, comments on business. Looking, I see 2 hands up.
Mr. Gale.
Yes, thank you. First off, Gene, please stop making faces. Stop making noises and grunting when people speak. Stop bloviating. We know you love the sound of your own voice more than the callers, more than anything else. And it's kind of sad to see this, to be honest with you. Again, you messed up the Pledge of Allegiance. That shows everything you need to know about you as a person. That's really sad and disgraceful. You should be ashamed. To the caller who said I was out of state is completely and flat out lying. She's entirely inaccurate. That is a bold-faced lie. I have not left the state. To make up such things just goes to show you how much people go to try to affect the lives of others. I did go to Disney World in the first week of September while the schools were fully locked down, and we quarantined for 14 days afterwards. So if you're going to get your facts right and you want to call people out, you might want to do it properly. Unfortunately, you don't want to do that. Again, if you do not feel comfortable sending your child to school, don't do it. Given that, you have no say in this conversation about the children who want to attend full time. This does not affect you in any way, shape, or form. So stop trying to control the lives of others, and you're affecting other children. Fact of the matter is we have children who are truly suffering. When we speak in the public comments and we bring this up, all we hear is, well, just get them the help. Well, Jesus, if it was only that easy. Clearly, you've never had to walk in to find your 12-year-old child a heartbeat away from death, finding the note that she left there. Then to find out there were 5 other children involved, this is a serious issue that has to be dealt with. How many children are acceptable to lose to suicide over a possible spread of a virus? This is a real question that needs to be answered. This is not hyperbole. This is a real thing the school board needs to grapple with, and you completely avoid it every single time. These children are suffering. This is a real issue. Fact of the matter is the virus is not spreading in the schools. So let's get this on the agenda and have a real conversation, because otherwise this is what you're going to get. And yes, we're going to ramp the protests right back up. Gene, you're first. We've already cleared it with the police. We're coming, and we're going to be loud, and we're going to make our voices heard. We're going to bring the largest crowd you've ever seen down there, because this is unacceptable. Until you bring our children back in, we're going to disturb you at every possible opportunity. This is not okay. If our children are suffering, you're going to hear from us at every waking turn. We do not want to force anybody in the schools who do not want to go. So please stop bringing that up to everybody who does on there. Now that brings us to the other topic, the firing of Dr. Sachs. This is completely irresponsible, completely illegal, and is part of the representation of the basic crystal knock that happened this weekend as far as everything else goes with social media is concerned.
30 seconds.
This is 1938 Germany happening right in front of our eyes, and the beginning of it was the firing of Dr. Sachs. So if the board wants to be complicit in something as horrible as 1938 Germany, go right ahead. The fact of the matter is we're going to stand up. We're going to continue to bring our protests to Dr. Russell's house until she does the right thing and puts Dr. Sachs back in the position that she deserves to be in. To fire somebody over their means is unconstitutionally wrong and immoral. Thank you.
Mrs. Rudolph.
Hi, thank you for the time on this new topic. I wanted to bring up something about what Jean had said about that there is discussion room in the other committees. But what I would like to say to that is that here's the thing, there is no goal or plan to return to full time. So I wanted you guys to be really transparent about that. So you may say that, oh yes, we're talking about it, there's discussions, and it's just not this committee. It's just not this committee. It wasn't last week, it's not this one. And then when we show up in those committees, it's not going to be in there. The point is you don't have a goal. So I'm a therapist and I see things in terms of goals. So I understand you made a goal for hybrid and you achieved it. And I will give you the congratulations that you deserve for that. And I know everybody, 100,000 people, there's going to be 100,000 more parents that want to give you that same praise. But we've all heard it and we all know, yes, you got hybrid, you achieved that goal. Thank you. It worked. It's good. It's especially some people really love it and are thriving, and we're happy. So since you're so successful when you set a goal and you achieve it, I'm asking that you please set the next goal. So while you may have other committees that you can talk about these topics in, which I've yet to believe, the point is you don't have a goal that there is a goal for school to return full time. You have to first set a goal before you can achieve it. If I don't set goals, my patients don't set goals, we don't achieve anything. So you clearly set a goal for hybrid. Congratulations again on accomplishing it. Well done. Now, that was last year. It's a new year. We need to set a new goal. So while there are supposed committees and times and neat little places for these conversations that you'd like us to move to, we will surely be, you know that we're going to be there and we'll show up, and nobody will ever accuse me of not coming to a board meeting ever again because I'll be there. So you can count on that. But the point is we need a goal. So while you do have these committees that you have supposed spaces for these conversations, you don't have goals for them. So you have to have an agenda, a goal, a plan. You have to actually, I have 28 seconds, thank you. So we need to actually have it as a goal. So I want to be really clear about that to the parents. There is no goal at this point in time. You had a goal for hybrid, you achieved it, but you need a new goal for full-time. And again, conversations will be needed to get there. Thank you.
Mr. Saylor.
Yes, thank you. As I did at the last meeting, I'm going to take time to admonish Mr. Gale. No board member should be threatened at all. And someone who has lost family in the Shoah, I could tell you that this is not anywhere near Nazi Germany. And the use of those terms so easily and so baselessly don't represent the vast majority of the parents in this community who have concerns, who want to see the schools opened up. And I just think as a group, we need to act better and act more civilized. Spewing nonsense like, I know where you live and we're going to come after you. That's just unprofessional and disgusting behavior. And that's not where this community, that's not what, PV is about. That's certainly not what I'm about. And that's not what a lot of people who want to see the schools open. Dr. Hallis, I think it's great not knowing that there was a committee. I would highly suggest to the board that the next committee be done in an open forum setting, and maybe even start to put 3 members who are pro the schools opening on that board with 3 members of people who want to keep that hybrid situation that we're at now, so there's a balance. Add them to the committee, meaning citizens of the school district, maybe someone from the K through K to 5, 6 middle school and high school. That way there's a good balance, and have a more open discussion and open reporting system. I think that would follow the laws that the state ask that school districts to do, and I think that would make the community feel much better. So if that's something that could be added, I think that would, putting a committee of a bipartisan committee. And when I mean bipartisan, I don't mean political. I mean having 3 people that want the school to open, 3 people that want to remain in hybrid, and having those people help the group tank get to that goal of reopening the school. And yes, we would need to the first thing would be, our objective is to reopen the school on this date. And then how do we come about doing that in the best setting? The rest is, I can yield my time.
Mr. Lichtenstein.
Hi, yes, this is Jackie Lichtenstein again from Skipback Township. And I'd like to thank Mr. Saylor for bringing up the fact that the terms that were used by Mr. Gale should not absolutely be used to describe the way things are happening with the opening of school. Also, the previous caller talked about goals, having goals and needing goals met. Well, I'd like to remind everybody that there is goals. They're listed in the attestation form, and it has specific points that mentions, when we're below certain point percentages, we can resume, in school. So I'm not sure what the logic is there, but those to me are the goals. Nobody wants to keep their kids home. And my kids are not virtual, they are hybrid. And they would like to be back in school full time as well. And it's not happening right now because the virus is in control. The reason why we can't set dates about June 1st or May 1st or whatever is because the virus is in control. So keep that in mind. And thank you again to the board for following the facts and for signing the attestation form. Thank you.
Mr. Durr, no more comments.
Thank you. So 5.02 was done on January 4th. 5.03 is the grants and donations. You can scroll up. I think the bottom one is from last week, but if you can see them listed, there's 4 different grants: Power Packs, Capital Campaign, Calm Down Corners, and Disc Golf. 5.04, 5.05, 5.06, 5.07 are all on consent. 5.08 is a new item. Motion to approve Indian Valley appraisal to approve an updated 3-year report on tax parcel 4.0-01636-00-7 at a cost of $11,000 as presented. And I so move.
Second, Wade.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ayes?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, motion passes.
Okay, 5.09 is a presentation of the 2021-2022 budget. Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Doerr. Dr. Russell, if it benefits the school board, let's start on slide 26 because the information that I have to present is identical to the information that was presented in December. From December to January, historically, there is very little to no movement on either the revenues or the expenditure side of things, mainly because of the holidays and the break. We have not hit yet February, which is when the governor provides his budget presentation for the state. We continue in the background to look at the various data, signs, and trends that we typically use for the preparation of our budget. So real quick, as was presented in December for tonight, we have $111,192,170 on the revenue side. We are showing expenditures, projected expenditures of $116,862,15. That will drive home a 7.64% tax increase as it currently stands. One of the motions on the consent agenda was to approve the Act 1 resolution, which locks us in at a 3% goal for our budget. And our goal is to get there, which this resolution locks in place. And then we work backwards. We either show increased revenues, we show decreasing expenditures, or we utilize available fund balances to our advantage that we have in place. So Dr. Russell, if you will move to the next slide. Two of those fund balances we've talked about, and we've set in many philosophical conversations before. This has been going on for several years now. We use available fund balances for our PSERS committed balance of $373,000, and we are recommending that we use a debt service fund allotment for the 21-22 budget of $594,316. Doing so, in the next slide, Dr. Russell, you will see those two recommended uses of fund balances show up in February for board approval. And the approval of those fund balance uses brings the shortfall down to $4.7 million. When you see what a 3% tax increase will drive of $2,225,000, that means our shortfall then is to make up to get to the 3% goal is $2.476 million. With available fund balances yet to use to discuss and use, Dr. Russell, if you were to switch, our unassigned fund balance at $9,013,000, our COVID reserve that we've set aside, that should be about 2.8, almost $2.9 million at hand, those two fund balances available to offset that tax increase to get us to the 3% or below for a tax increase for 21-22. Dr. Russell, if you were to go one more slide. That was the recommendation. I'm so thankful that the board followed through on that. And again, we do have confidence that with the available fund balances at our side, we will get to the 3% tax increase and continue to drive and make changes to massage that to get that below that. And that, I believe, is all that I have for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Dr. Hallis, that is my section.
Thank you, Mr. Doerr. That brings us to section 6, payment of bills. Dr. Weston, if you would, please.
Thank you, Dr. Hallis. Item 6.01, comments on payment of bills. Comments from the audience are accepted on payment of bills, and I will ask if there are comments to please identify which of the agenda items you are commenting on. Item 6.02, the ratification, or 6.03, the approval of Treasurer's report. Do we have any comments? From the public.
It's Dr. Weston. Mr. Gale?
Yes, my name is Jared Gale, Lower Frederick Township. As payment of bills regarding the need for the students to be in school, and that pertains to it absolutely. First off, I'd like to know how anything we're saying is threatening. We are promising that we're going to exercise our First Amendment rights. Clearly that bothers some people. Why? I'm not really sure, but making such slanderous accusations about what really in all reality are block parties, replete with children, coffee, and donuts is quite disgusting. So you might want to get your facts straight. We're not doing anything inappropriate in any way, shape, or form. We are simply using our rights that I fought for and lost 42 of my guys in the desert for. So before you start trying to silence people, you might want to think about that. Now, to turn back to the other stuff people have accused me of, I am a Jew. I have family members who have tattoos on their arms from concentration camps. So I don't want to hear that I can't talk about it. Fact of the matter is, I know about it way more than you do. I have heard the stories, and there is reason we have this slogan, never again. To continue to try to silence those who speak out, to praise the public silencing of a part of the population is exactly what happened in 1938 Germany. So before you try to denigrate someone, you might want to get your facts straight. I have every right to speak about the Holocaust and the scary, frightening parallels that are happening right in front of us here. Right now, this board has tried time and again to silence people. They have tried to arrest people for trying to speak out multiple times. They have abused their power to call children and youth services because they don't agree with the positions of the people. They have threatened with automatic weapons other members of the community. These are real facts that are attached to the public record that I've emailed in. And if they're not, Mr. Subers, you're going to have a real big problem because that legally needs to be attached on there. And again, Mr. Subers, you need to step down because you broke your ethics. You broke your code of conduct. You lied flat out about Beth Roberts' criminal records. You both know that she has summary offenses for bad checks. And that brings us to payment of bills. How is this going to affect the community with the lawsuits from Dr. Sachs? How much insurance really do you have for that? Because I can tell you, going to the Supreme Court as it's going to happen is going to cost way more than the insurance is going to cover. So has that been factored in at all? Or is this another one of your agenda items that you've conveniently left off? Because that seems to happen a lot around here. So really there's twofold here. We need two things. We need an agenda item to open the schools full-time for those who want it. Nobody is being forced. Nobody is going to be forced into the schools against their will. Grandma is not going to die. The spread of the virus is not worth more than children committing suicide, ending up addicted to drugs, and falling through the cracks. And secondary, the cost the school is about to incur for the illegal actions they enforce upon Dr. Sachs is going to be grossly negligent. And Beth Roberts and Mr. Subers need to step down effective immediately. Thank you.
Dr. Weston, no more comments.
Thank you. Okay, we have the agenda visible again. Item 6.02, the ratification of bills and payroll and the authorization of payments. The recommended action on this item is a motion to ratify the payment of bills and payroll as per the list submitted for the period ending December 31st, 2020, and to authorize the payment of bills on the check and voucher registers submitted for January. And I so move.
Second, Matthew Dorr.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ayes, please.
Aye.
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 Any nays? Motion passes.
Item 6.03, the approval of the Treasurer's report and financial statements. The recommended action on this item is a motion to approve the Treasurer's report and financial statements, including the summary of cash and investment accounts as prepared by the administration for the period ending December 31st, 2020. And I so move.
Second, Matthew Dorr.
We have a motion and a second. Ayes, please.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, motion passes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That concludes section 6.
All right, section 7 now, please, if you would do that, Mrs. White, please. Or Miss White, sorry.
No problem. At this time, on section 7.01, comments on professional personnel are accepted. Mr. Ganesh?
Mr. Gale?
Yes, hi. My comments pertain to professional personnel and the fact of Beth Roberts being on the board here. She's actually apparently sworn in by a judge, and therefore she is bound and obligated to make factual statements when in a meeting. So to claim that she has never, actually she hasn't claimed that she has never had a criminal record. In fact, she dodges the question every time. So I'm asking right now, right here, here's your opportunity. Clear up the record, Beth. Go ahead. Please refute what I said. Deny it. please do so. I have the records attached right here. Fact of the matter is, you have multiple criminal offenses for bouncing checks. You have also been sued by multiple people for thousands of dollars. These are the facts. As such, you are not fit to serve on this board. You just aren't. So you need to do the right thing and resign, and not the little stunt you pulled over the summer where you pretend like you resign for attention and all that stuff like that. We know how that works. Fact of the matter is, you need to do the right thing and resign. Or the board needs to force her off the board for being dishonest and disloyal and disobeying her oath that she took in order to get on that board. Because the truth needs to come out. So go ahead, Beth. Please clear up the record. Here is your opportunity. It's not a question and answer session, but you have all the time in the world to speak. And you've been strangely silent on it. Why? What are you hiding? We would like to know. All of us would like to know. Fact of the matter is, you're not being honest. And that should be the main crux of this whole issue. As a member of the board, you need to set an example for our students. Leaning back and chain smoking cigarettes is not appropriate. Wishing the president of the United States, whether you agree with him or not, death is not appropriate. All of these things have been found on your Facebook and will be attached to the public record. How is that appropriate message to send to our children? You want to attack me, you want to denigrate me, that's fine. I'm not on the board yet. And I say yet because I am running for the board. And I will unseat you. And it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So fact of the matter is, you need to answer these questions, Beth, because you're bound by a legal obligation under an oath. And you haven't abided by that. So go ahead and clear up the record for all of us. We're patiently awaiting. And Mr. Subers, again, you are an officer of the court. I know for a fact that you know how to use that website. So either, again, you're completely incompetent and just completely overlooked it,
30
or
seconds.
you lied. So which one is it, Mr. Subers? Please answer this question. This is important because you're going to be defending the school in a legal case going up to the federal courts pertaining to Dr. Sachs. How can you do that when you violated your oath? Please answer these questions. I want both of you to answer the questions. I yield my time.
Mr. Kendall.
Thank you. I'm going to ask some questions and I don't expect answers, but I'm asking them because there is no personnel committee, so there's no other opportunity to ask these questions outside of this venue. The first ones are for Dr. Russell. In June of 2020, when you asked Dr. Sachs, the principal of Evergreen Elementary School, to quote, bring evidence of your rating and ideas for next year to a meeting with you, did you have any intention of discussing her ideas for the next school year, or did you mislead and deceive Dr. Sachs by misrepresenting the purpose of the meeting that you invited her to? On July 2nd, 2020, when Dr. Sachs was told that rather than being terminated outright, she'd be demoted to the role of inclusion facilitator subject to board approval, had you previously discussed this offer with the board? Did any collusion take place between you and the board with respect to this offer prior to making it? Was the outcome of their approval decision predetermined? Was the offer actually made in good faith? On July 10th, 2020, after telling Dr. Sachs that the board had rejected her for the inclusion facilitator role, you informed her that she would instead be severely demoted to the instructional support teaching position at Middle School West. When you informed her that this was the role you were offering, did you make it clear to her that this position was a long-term substitute position that would expire upon the return of the teacher who was filling in for her, who was on maternity leave? Did you tell her that, or did you hide that information from her? Did you omit it from that discussion? On July 13th, 2020, you sent Dr. Sachs a letter asking her to consent to resigning from her position as principal and accept a demotion. Your name is on that letter. It comes from you. Did you write this letter, or did you have counsel write it for you? And if you had counsel, did anyone from the district ever recommend that Dr. Sachs retain counsel? Did you downplay the importance of having an attorney or an Act 93 representative present for the meetings you held with her, while you yourself used the services of an attorney? These last few questions are for Dr. Russell and the entirety of the board. Throughout this process of, quote, consensual demotions and resignations, was any consideration given to how this process would be perceived by the public? In other words, did you intentionally downplay your efforts to remove Dr. Sachs to avoid raising questions, the kinds of questions we're asking now, when you can conveniently hide behind the fact that this is an ongoing legal matter to avoid providing answers? Was there thought put into concealing your actions from us by presenting these decisions as voluntary rather than compelled? Unfortunately, we are not just talking about what you did anymore. That was egregious enough in itself. We're talking also now about how you did it.
30 seconds.
There are right and wrong answers to these questions, ethical and unethical answers, moral and immoral. We're going to find out what those answers are. We're going to get to the truth. We don't know yet, but we will. And when we do, we are going to hold you accountable. I yield my time.
Ms. White, back to you.
Okay, so 7.02 is on consent. 7.03 is approval of leaves of absence. This is a motion to approve the leaves of absence as listed. And I so move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ayes, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, motion passes.
7.04 is on consent. 7.05 is the motion to approve a memo of understanding between the Perkiomen Valley School District and the Perkiomen Valley Education Association pertaining to the mandatory IEP documentation. And I so move.
Second, Matthew Dorr.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ayes, please.
Aye.
Aye.
And any nays? Okay, motion passes.
And item 7.06 is a new item. It's a motion to ratify the provisional employment of the long-term substitute and extended daily substitute personnel as listed, pending fulfillment of all statutory requirements. And I so move.
Second, Matthew Dorr.
And I'm sorry, go ahead, Jean.
Oops, sorry. We have a motion and a second. Ayes, please.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion passes.
And that ends my section.
Okay. Section 8, please, Mrs. Roberts.
Thank you, Dr. Hallis. Any comments on support personnel, please?
Mr. Gale?
Yes, I have some comments. First and foremost, Jean, another mistake tonight. You meant to send a private message to everybody on the team there on the board, but you screwed up and you sent it to everybody instead. And I'll quote it for everybody here so everybody can read it. Stay strong and let him go, referring to Dave Kendall. So what are you trying to stay strong about? The fact that you don't have a case with Dr. Sachs, the fact you're hiding all these things? All of his questions were very pertinent and very relevant. And you have to send a little message behind the scenes, everybody. Well, guess what? There's things called a right to know. And we're going to file them regarding that. So every sort of communication you've had this evening, all your little smirks and gestures and everything, they'll all be documented. Because honestly, you're running a very unprofessional meeting. And I know you want to make comments about me and all this stuff, but guess what? I'm not the board president. You screwed up the Pledge of Allegiance, was an offensive to everybody here. Now you're sending messages and you screw up and you send it to everybody instead. How can we trust you to be in charge of our children? How can we trust you to come up with a plan to reopen the schools? Because quite frankly, we've heard nothing, not a peep. The silence is deafening. It's ironic to see how you sit here and send little messages around back and forth and everything and pretend like you're so holier than thou, want to just pat yourself on the back on how great of a job you did. Stop living in the past. Let's talk about our children's future. You have not once mentioned anything productive about bringing our children back. You just haven't. You want to talk about how great you are and you lie about, oh, all the schools around here are virtual, fully virtual. We're the only one that's open. No, that is completely, in fact, and totally inaccurate. You're flat out lying. You are absolutely lying. Most of the school districts in Montgomery County have been hybrid. That is the fact. It is not the other way around. You stated that most are virtual. A very small minority are fully virtual. And as far as your yeoman's work, guess what? I was in the Navy. I take offense to you using that term. You don't even know what a yeoman actually is. I guarantee it, you don't. So don't sit here and preach to us about how great you are and how grand you are while you're being totally unprofessional, totally just sending private messages you can't even get accurate, screwing up the Pledge of Allegiance. Come on, Gene. I know you know better than that. And it's to the caller who wants to talk about people going out of state and everything. Well, Gene, you have pictures of you and your family going down the shore, celebrating, having a great time, might I add, without masks on. So how dare you sit here and talk about the community spread and all this stuff like that? Because honestly, you're not following your own rules. It's rules for thee and not for me. That's how it works with you.
30 seconds.
So at the end of the day, you got to stop this nonsense and be professional and get the kids back in school for those who choose to do so. That is the fact of the matter. That's what we're talking about here. And the reinstatement of Dr. Sachs needs to be immediate because what you did was illegal, wrong, and unethical, just like the way you're running this board. I yield my time.
Mrs. Roberts, no more hands raised.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mrs. Roberts.
Okay. 8.02, 8.03, 8.04, 8.0 are all on consent. 8.05 is a new item. The acceptance of resignations and retirements. The motion is to accept the resignations and retirements as listed. And I so move.
Second, Matthew Dorr.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ayes, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, motion passes.
8.06 is also a new item. We have the approval of support appointments. The motion is to approve the provisional employment of the support personnel as listed per statutory requirement. And I so move.
Second, Matthew Dorr.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ayes, please.
Aye.
Nays? Okay, motion passes.
And that concludes section 8. Thank you, Dr. Hallis.
Okay, thank you very much. Section 9 is governance. Mrs. Mayers, please. Oop, you're muted.
Yep, I apologize. Thank you. Section 9.01, comments on governance. I see a raised hand, Mr. Ganesh.
Mr. Gale.
Yes, thank you. Again, I'm asking for Beth Roberts to answer these questions. You just had the opportunity to speak and you completely ignored it. So what does that mean, Beth? You have the chance to clear this up. You wanted to preach and bloviate about how false these accusations were before. Now is your opportunity. What are you hiding? You have multiple convictions in Pennsylvania and you have multiple civil cases in different states. So you have one in Maryland and one in Pennsylvania. So if I'm wrong, please refute me. You threatened slander against me. Go ahead. Why not bring that? Here's your opportunity. Fact of the matter is, it has to be true. Your silence speaks volumes. Now, let's get back to the kids in the school. We know that scientifically, it has been shown that the spread does not happen in the school. For the people who want to say we have our facts and blah, 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 we do have real studies. Every single study has shown, almost every single study has shown that the students are safer in school than out of school. I would like you to show one study, a single study. I dare anybody, audience or board member, to present one single study that shows locking the schools down or having them in a hybrid environment helps prevent the spread of the transmission of disease, because that's the only goal you can have in that. There is no other goal you can have. And that means you are willing to accept children's suicides, falling through the cracks, being beaten half to death, being addicted to drugs, being hungry because they can't get their food. How many more children need to suffer for this? Clearly, there has to be a line for you. So I want you to answer that question. How many children need to be beaten before you say it's better for them to be in school? How many children need to be addicted to drugs and ruin their lives before you decide they're better in school? How many underprivileged children, Black and brown children, have to go hungry and starve because you won't let them in the school? How many college career plans are now ruined because you won't let them in the school? How many more dead children do there need to be from self-harm, which is growing at an exponential rate because you won't let them in the school? When is it enough for you? There has to be a line at some point. And again, this is not for everybody, but we're asking for those who wish to attend full-time in-person education without lockdowns. That we need to make decisions based on science, data, and facts, not fear and speculation without a shred of science to it. And that's what you're doing here. And it's unacceptable because our children's lives are at risk and you are accountable for it. Each and every one of you that votes and decides to keep the children out of the school and prevent them from having full-time is part of it. Now, there are ways we can go
30
about this. We can use the gymnasiums. We can use the auditoriums. We can use the stages. We can even erect tents in the fields and heat them like we do. If they're good for restaurants, they're good for our children to be able to learn. We can rent portable classrooms. We can rent out vacant businesses. Lord knows there's enough of them around here from the lockdowns. There are ways to do this. We can be creative and come up with it. But sending snarky messages, Gene, and making noises when I speak, that just shows how just horrid your character is.
Mrs. Mears, back to you.
Thank you. Section 9.02. The motion is to hold a second reading and adopt the following policies: 612, 613, 614, 706.1, 708, 811, 909, and 911. And I so move.
Second, Matthew Dort.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ayes, please.
Aye.
Nays? Okay, motion passes.
Section 9.03, discussion on board appointments to committees for the 2021 school year. And Dr. Hallis, I think you're taking over.
Yeah, and again, if people have an interest in switching on anything, I know I put out earlier in the meeting that I'd like someone to replace me on the Regional Planning Commission, and I know there's another request from folks, from someone to look at another committee assignment. So if anybody has anything else, please let me know, or if anybody wants to make a comment now.
So Dr. Hallis, I'll take over your spot on the Planning Commission, if that's all right. I would ask that another board member would take over the Health and Wellness Committee for me.
Well, that actually sort of works because someone else wants to join that. So, so unless there's anybody else interested in the positions, that actually works out pretty easily. Okay. So, all right. Unless there's any other comments. Okay. Item 9.04.
Thank you. 9.04, discussion, review of the 2020 board goals. And I believe we mentioned in particular last week, looking at the education section.
Mm-hmm. So comments? I think, hold on, I see a hand up. Is that you, Matt? Looks like there's a hand up.
Yes, yeah, I put my hand up again.
Okay.
Can this be a revolving? I think this needs to be something that progresses. I mean, I spent a little time reading over it, but I think we need a little more time.
Okay. I mean, I concur considering the situation. This is a rather unusual year. And it looks like Mrs. Lofton.
I believe that one of our policies calls upon us to establish annual goals. So I think it's great if we look at this as a working document that we continually refer back to. I think that we do this as an exercise every year and then put it on a shelf and then bring it back up. And, you know, maybe this is just an ongoing document, but we are supposed to establish annual goals.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. So we'll come back and visit this again.
And I believe that ends my section.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Mayers. Section 10, closing items. Comments from the audience. If you would, Mr. Ganesh. Mr. Gale has his hand up.
Mr. Gale.
Yes. Gene, you pat yourself on the back of how great you're doing. We all heard how giddy and smirky you got when you decided that I wasn't able to speak twice in one session while you were able to speak as much as you want. It wasn't against the rules. You just didn't want to hear from us. That shows exactly how much you are just morally bankrupt as a person because you want to try to silence people that disagree with you. Again, this is 1938 Germany happening right in front of our eyes, and you're leading the charge. So what does that make you, Gene? Think about that for a little bit. And when you go home tonight, I want you to look in the mirror. I want each of you to look in the mirror and think about the dead children who are committing suicide in our community and how you're going to react and how you're going to answer that question when the inevitable happens and we lose a child to suicide in our district. Because if you keep this up, it's going to happen. Statistically, it's almost a fact. So how are you going to handle that? How are you going to address that? How is that going to make you feel? I can't imagine it's going to make you feel real great. So why don't you start doing the right thing and put the plan in place to get these students back into school? Because fact of the matter is that is far more significant than the virus. It truly is. We can do it if doctors, nurses, and people like that are able to go to work daily and not contract the virus. We can find ways for our teachers to do so. I am not against our teachers. I think our teachers are doing an amazing job. To quote you from last week, Gene, yeoman's work. And I'll give you a clue. Yeoman's kind of like a secretary in the Navy. But secretaries don't make the kind of mistakes that you did tonight. They know how to pronounce the Pledge of Allegiance correctly. They know how to send messages to the team without blasting out to everybody by accident. So don't quote about yeomans again. You have no right to speak about it. You didn't serve. You don't know what you're talking about. We need to get our children back in school. We need to do the right thing by them by reinstating Dr. Sachs. She was an integral part of that school. And everybody here knows it. It was done for political reasons, and today's environment, it is showing exactly what the problem is. You guys started a little bit early from everybody else, but it's not okay to do. It doesn't make it right. You have to sit there and answer these questions. You just aren't. And Beth, again, here's your chance. If you don't answer it, that means you are guilty of it. And as such, you have no right to be on this board. You need to resign immediately. You've been making false statements and abusing your power. Calling children's services on me because you disagree with me is abhorrent and disgusting. And your soul is as wretched as your yard looks. It's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. You should resign immediately. You wanted to threaten me with an AR-15. You wanted to arrest me. You wanted to sue me for slander. Go ahead. I dare you. You can't because it's true. Answer these questions. You can't because you have no answer to them. I'm done.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands from, oh, wait, another one went up with attendees.
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Liggett and Mr. Kendall.
Mr. Kendall?
I want to start by saying that after the events of last week, we should all be able to agree that violence is abhorrent and counterproductive. There is no place for it. I'd also like to point out that nobody here has ever called for violence, ever. I want to speak to those who are listening, who agree that what happened to Dr. Sachs was wrong, but take issue with the methods of some of the people supporting her reinstatement and calling for the reopening of schools through protests. I think you need to consider something. You should not ascribe your values and principles to people who do not share those values and principles. I'll say that again. You should not ascribe your values and principles to people who do not share those values and principles. I understand wanting to assume the best of people, but when they've proven you shouldn't, you should pay attention. Civil discourse, for instance, is something that I, like many of us, place considerable value upon. But the leadership of our district here tonight does not. And they don't have to tell you that, they've showed you. They showed you when instead of sitting down with Dr. Sachs and having a dialogue about her social media posts, they blindsided her in a meeting that they misrepresented as a planning meeting. They showed you when instead of having a dialogue, they told her that their minds were made up. There was no opportunity for a performance improvement plan, a second chance, a shot at redemption, no forgiveness. They showed you when instead of discussing their plans for her openly with the public, they misrepresented her demotions as voluntary, when behind the scenes they were putting pressure on her. So while I understand the calls for civil discourse, I also recognize the reality of our situation. Civil discourse alone is insufficient to fight back against people who pay lip service to it, but don't value it. Now, freedom of speech is another value that many of us hold dear, but it's not one we should ascribe to them. If it was something they valued, we wouldn't be here discussing Dr. Sachs at all tonight. And while we're on the subject of free speech, let me make something perfectly clear. There is no moral equivalence between elected members of government at any level trampling a citizen's First Amendment rights and citizens leveraging their First Amendment rights to the fullest extent permitted by law through protesting to voice their anger over that injustice. There is no moral equivalence. One of these things is a gross abuse of power. The other is the right thing to do. We cannot be more concerned about being nice than being good. We cannot afford to use civility as a mask for cowardice when courage is what is called for. Courage to speak up when we see one of our neighbors under attack for exercising her rights as an American citizen. Courage to peacefully protest when our calls for justice fall on deaf ears. We've seen this cancel culture play out all over the country year after year.
30 seconds.
Reaching a fever pitch. The bullying, the isolation, the intimidation. No more. No more. Right now, we need to stand up for every employee of this district, every principal, teacher, cafeteria worker, janitor, bus driver, all of them, regardless of their politics. Their voices matter. They have a right to speak, not by the grace of some petty elected bureaucrats, but because they're American citizens and it's their God-given inherent right. Thank you.
Mr. Liggett.
Thank you, Mr. Ganesh. Good evening. This is Robert Liggett from Perkiomen Township. Really feel like just taking a second to breathe after all of this, but let me try to get back right into the comments here. First of all, there's been a procedural point that's been brought up, and I think we should just make it clear, and Mr. Subers might be able to back me on this. Item 1.08, comments on any topic, procedures for public comment during virtual board meetings. Section 3 of that says an individual may offer comments under more than one agenda section, but no one will be recognized to speak more than once under any agenda section. So yielding back your time, while it sounds good, is functionally not possible because on each individual agenda item, you get to speak once for your 3 minutes. Secondly, saying that parents and people that have chosen to have their children go virtual have no place in this conversation is simply, in my opinion, wrong. All members of our community have the ability to comment. It's their First Amendment right, just as it is everyone else's First Amendment right to hijack this meeting. The chair has been more than generous in allowing off-topic speech happen than I would be personally if I was on the chair. Back when I was about the only person who attended board meetings, if I had a comment on a topic, I would plainly say I rise in opposition or support to item, say, 4.06, and then make my comment. This way, the meeting can move on and people know exactly where you stand and that your comments are on point. That so many people are just allowed to speak out of order is really a testament to the leniency of the chair that we have here tonight. Those of us that want to see students on site, and I'm one of them, I want my children to be on site as much as possible. But their interests are not served by rants that go on about personal matters, about whether it's grunts or other perceived personal issues. Let's stick to the facts and stick to what is going on here. This is how your voice is going to gain strength in the community, by staying on point. I know I got about 30 seconds. I'd just like to follow this up with one last thing. My mother used to say, when you point a finger at somebody, 3 point right back at you. And that's the situation I see here and I feel. I don't think any of us in this community likes the tone of these meetings has taken in recent days. Let's work together on the committees and with the board administration to make this a better community for all of us. Thank you.
Mrs. Rudolph.
Hi, thank you. I'd like to comment on something that the last commenter just said about being able to have a place to have these comments seeming irrelevant and not pertaining to the topic. And I understand the structure of these meetings, and that's why I continue to ask for a proper place to hold these conversations about a pathway back to school full time. Now, so I've said that so many times. Everybody really truly understands that I would like to have that agenda so that we can have that conversation in whichever meeting the board chooses to, the safety or health and whatever, wherever you want to put it. We're just asking for it to be an actual agenda item so we can have those conversations done properly and procedurally correct. I'm all for that. So that I would like to see that, and please let us know if the board is going to move forward with that. I would love to hear that, and I promise to keep my comments about that topic in that proper section. But I wanted to say something else, because I agree with what the commenters were saying about Dr. Sachs. It was just really wrong. And, now it's a big federal case, and, this is all over national television and other countries too. So it's really, this does not look good, but it's not good. And it doesn't look good for our district. And now it's a lot of money to, and I don't blame her, because she shouldn't be censored, and what was done to her was wrong. So I really want to put that out there, but it makes me think about where else is this happening? I know last week there was a former student of PV that spoke on behalf of Dr. Sachs. And he was very well spoken, and he made so many great points. And he talked about his own censorship in classes with different teachers, and that you're only allowed to have one voice, like that has to be whatever they want you to talk about, and everything else is being silenced. So I'm wondering about how many teachers have voices. I get to come on here and talk, and I appreciate being able to, but there's a lot of teachers out there that they're not allowed to speak up. And I know that. And I just want to, mention that, because I know that there's so many people being silenced here, and I'm not afraid to speak up, and it doesn't matter, because I'm just a parent and I can, but there's so many teachers out there. And I just want to say something on behalf of them and anybody that had anything wrong done to them, nowhere near like Dr. Sachs, but I'm sure these things happen. And again, there's no proper place in the meetings to discuss this. So that's why we are just putting it in wherever we can. But if there can be a space for it, I would be happy to keep it procedurally correct. Thank you.
Mrs. Hoy.
I just wanted to speak to the one commenter that said, we need to stop talking about personal things. So the thing is here, this is very personal. This is affecting children and families, and in ways that you can't even describe. I mentioned it before. I have a niece that cannot be alone because of the virtual. She is in such a bad place that she can never be alone by herself, in fear of what might happen, because kids in dark places make bad decisions, and they just keep getting looked over. And this is very personal for all of us, and this is very personal for all of the parents. And that is why we are speaking out so much. And that is why we need to figure out when we can start. I'm going to come inside in 1 minute. We can get it on the agenda to get these kids back in full-time school. Thank you. I'm coming inside. Come on.
There are no more raised hands. Back to you, Dr. Hollis.
Thank you very much. That moves us to the next section, 10.02, comments from board members. And Mrs. Mayers, looks like you have your hand up.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to the members of our community who are speaking out in a diplomatic way so that we can try to move forward. I would like to see an agenda item on either the safety and operations, the education, or the wellness committee about how can we move forward towards getting more students back in school. I understand that we have an attestation form, but I think that our community and Dr. Russell and our administration has done a fantastic job in the past, and I know, and they're continuing to do so, that I really have faith that we can look at this and see if there is anything that we can do to possibly move us forward. I also have a student with a lot of needs, and I feel your pain immensely. The pain watching our students suffer is very difficult. And I'm thankful that a lot of students are doing really well. But I can understand some of the community's frustration, and maybe they feel a little bit just frustrated and not knowing where to go to try to move things forward. So I look forward to seeing how we can move that conversation along, if at all possible. Thank you all for your hard work.
Okay, Mr. Dorr, do you have a comment?
I do. Thank you, Dr. Alice. So I've been on the board for almost 3 years now. I usually take notes of everyone that's speaking. I wanted to thank Heather. I apologize if I couldn't pronounce your last name. Dave Kendall, Jackie Lichtenstein, Dave D'Amico, Christian Siebel, who appreciates virtual right now, which I think is great. Jason Saylor, Betsy Stone. This is tough. I mean, I have 2 kids in this district. I joined the board because of what's going on in public education. I think every one of the board members thinks about getting kids back to school right now. I think that's the thing that gets them up, thing that gets them to sleep. So I just want to say we appreciate the community members that come out. I wish more would come out from both sides, from all sides. This isn't easy. It really isn't. I mean, we're all losing sleep over this. So I would just ask for everyone that comes out and speaks, even including you, Mr. Gale, we need you because we only know what we know. So I just want to thank you for your comments tonight, and I'm making note of it. And I think we all want the same thing.
Any other board members? Okay, I have one quick comment, and you're right, Mr. Gale. I made a statement, and the thing was, it wasn't against who you thought it was against. It was in reference to you because people were gravely offended by your comments regarding Crystal Knock. And I have to say, again, you repeatedly judge us and claim that you know us. I'm the son of an immigrant born in a monastery in Austria as my grandfather fought against the Nazis. Okay, that child grew up to serve in Vietnam and have a injury rate of over 80%. He carried shrapnel welded to his bone till the day he died. Okay, I've been an intelligence fellow at the U.S. Army War College. Over my shoulder, there's challenge coins. So please stop lecturing me that I don't know what I'm talking about, because you clearly haven't done your research, and it's frankly offensive. If you want to argue about policy all day, but you constantly do character assassination. And that is exactly why I said to my colleagues to stay strong and let you go. That is exactly why. Okay. And notice, as you did this, we gave you 30 minutes practically of public comment, because it's 3 minutes allotted to each section, and you commented on every section tonight. So if you want to discuss policy, I am totally game to discuss policy. Okay, we would love to see schools open, but we're going to do it the right way. Okay, we're going to do it so that it's safe. And I am more than happy to talk about that. But if you want to talk about character assassination, I'm really not interested. I don't see how that helps move things forward. And that's about all I have to say about it. And that is why I sit here and let you go, because I'm not going to engage in that stuff, even though you claim that I do. So, and I just think that needs to be said, because people are deeply, deeply frustrated. And with that, Mrs. Lofton, you have comments?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Hallis. I want to say I also really can empathize with all the parents that are incredibly frustrated. I know exactly how it feels to have your child suffering and have not be able to fix the problems that are causing your child to suffer. And I know that that just breaks you apart inside. And so I understand how difficult this is. So please don't think, you know, as some of the other board members have said, please don't think that we don't care very deeply about trying to do everything that's right for your children, because that is why we are here. I do want to maybe take a moment to think about our committee structure. When we were working this summer, Dr. Russell had convened a task force on reopening the schools. And one of the concerns about that was it wasn't a public committee. So we had, as school started, we moved the conversations related to the reopening into the public committees. So the Safety and Operations Committee, the Health and Wellness Committee, the Education Committee, and you know, and I do wonder if having those different committees looking at the different pieces around our reopening models is the most effective way for us to be talking about this. You know, I do feel like we're probably going to be in a holding pattern for another month or two due to the high rates of transmission in the district. However, as the vaccines start to roll out and we do have the opportunity for our staff increasingly to become vaccinated, you know, we should be having these conversations in a way outside of the regular board meeting, because our regular board meetings are for conducting the business of motions and approving that. So perhaps reconvening the task force, but having it as a public, as an ad hoc committee would be a more effective way to be developing the plan and ensuring that all stakeholders in the community have an opportunity to be involved in the discussions.
Any other board comments?
Matt has his hand.
Is that your hand from before, Matt, or is that a new one?
Sorry, lowering it now.
Okay. Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands up for comments. So we're going to adjourn the meeting, but before adjourning, I just want to announce that we'll be meeting in executive session to talk about matters of personnel. And I think just personnel, correct?
That's all I'm aware of, Dr. Russell.
Okay.
There is also a legal topic.
Okay. Okay. So personnel and legal in the executive session. And with that, I adjourn this meeting. Good night, everybody. Take care.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.